I'm Matthew McCabe. Welcome to Miracle Voices. Each episode, we will be delving into stories of forgiveness, healing, and transformation that have come about from integrating the principles of the book A Course in Miracles. If you want to learn more about A Course in Miracles, visit www.acim.org. If you'd like to visit the Miracle Voices site, please go to www.miraclevoices.org. If you feel inspired to make a love offering, please visit us at miraclevoices.org/donate. All donations go to support the work of the Foundation for Inner Peace, the publisher of A Course in Miracles. Now here's your program. Hello, everybody. This is Matthew McCabe. Welcome to Miracle Voices. I'm here with my co-host, Tam Morgan. Tam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing so well. I'm so excited our hiatus is over.
Yes, me too. And you've had a lot of adventures. Maybe we'll get to that. But Joanne Menon, welcome to Miracle Voices as our guest today.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
Where are you sitting in the world, Joanne?
Today I am in Newport Beach, California. A week ago, I was in Olympic National Park, but now I am sitting at home at my office.
Oh, great. Great. And if anybody ever watched that movie Fletch with Chevy Chase, those beach scenes were right where you are. Did you ever see that movie?
I haven't.
Remember that.
Oh, it's a great one. It's a great one.
Now I have to watch it.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I mean, I can't believe you remember where that was filmed.
This randomness.
Incredible. Okay.
Well, Joanne, I'm excited to get into this with you because I got a little preview of your forgiveness story, but let's just start with how A Course in Miracles came into your life.
Oh, wow. Well, it came into my life because Marianne Williamson was speaking at the theater just down the street from my home. And, I had seen her name headlined, and a friend finally invited me to go with her. I had no idea who Marianne was. I had no idea that the Course in Miracles existed, but I showed up weekly to these fabulous lectures, and everything that Marianne said at the time was brand new to me, and I was just constantly blown away. I still didn't know what the course was after attending her lectures for over 6 months. And then finally, I asked someone next to me in the audience, like, what's this course thing she keeps talking about? And he looked at me like I was somewhat insane, and he just said, A Course in Miracles, the book that she sells out in the lobby every single week. And, had I seen the actual text before the lecture, it might have looked a little bit too familiar, like a Bible to me, and I might have run out the door. But Spirit has ways of bringing you in and getting your attention through experience. So once she really had me and had my attention, I finally bought the text and started reading on my own. And I studied, I think I went to her lectures faithfully for about 4 years. And then there was a turning point where I didn't quite resonate with what she was teaching. And then the next teacher came in, Gary Renard, the Holdens, eventually David Hoffmeister, someone that I, really pay attention to now. And then eventually I just started teaching on my own. I felt that I was called to do that. So, but yeah, I was brought in, I guess you could say, through the back door, a sneaky way to get me to read the course.
Whatever way works. That's a great way.
Yeah. I was brought in through the back door too. I get it.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Well, that's great. Well, how do you feel like A Course in Miracles has changed your life as you've kind of immersed yourself in it?
I mean, it's hard to even remember life prior to A Course in Miracles. And also, the course, I was studying the course before I earned a master's degree in spiritual psychology. And it was like the course was the intellectual side of this teaching, which I understood, but I hadn't experienced it as deeply as I had hoped. And then when I was getting my master's, that's where Mighty Companions came in. And it was like everything I had learned became real time in this classroom with 200 other students. And then from there, I really, I just kind of stuck with spiritual psychology for a while, but I realized that they dovetailed so perfectly. When I started my own coaching practice, at first it was all the tools of spiritual psychology, but every time I turned back to the book, I'm like, wait a minute, this goes so far beyond even spiritual psychology. So yes, I can use my tools to help people and reframe things or speak about projections, but then I'd go back to the course and it just kept referring to the one problem. And it's like, I can drag people through therapy sessions, but if I understand and can share with them the one problem and put that into diagrams for them, then suddenly there's almost no point in going into all the details of the problems that I was experiencing or anyone else. So I think for me, I've gone from a life of so many chaotic adventures. If you've been a caregiver and you've had to watch a parent, slowly slip away from Alzheimer's, that was so traumatic. The course was there, though, to support me and give me the strength of God. Same thing with my dad. He had dementia. The course was there for me. Even down to the day that my father passed away, I was given a very specific lesson to repeat. Before I knew he was going to pass away, I just kept repeating this one particular lesson until suddenly I was with him when he passed. And wow, the course was there for that. As I mentioned to you on the phone earlier, Matt, I've had a few past life experiences, but again, they were for the healing of the mind. But when I put those in the context of the course, talk about blocks to love, like, wow, there was somewhere in my subconscious that I had these stories of guilt and shame and betrayal that were playing out subconsciously. But then in order for those to be surfaced, they had to surface in my quote unquote real physical world life as well. So I could take those events, put them in the context of the course, and still be real time in the world. But then I had a way out. All I had to do was ask for the holy instant. And instead of analyzing everything to death, I could say, Spirit, just remove me. Show me the way out. So I would be given those real world steps. Just do this, just do this, just do this. And really thinking from my holy mind or being guided versus being trapped. The death grip of the ego is horrific. And so I feel now that the interval between when I am in upset and when I ask for forgiveness at the highest levels or forgiveness for salvation, the interval is so short now. I don't have to suffer long before Spirit immediately comes in with, do this right now, do this. And it's been, it's really developed my trust, my faith, my courage to be constantly given examples of how I can be supported in the real world. So yes, I get that I created some of this chaos going on in my life. But I have a way out and I can be at peace at the same time. So that's how, the course has truly helped me.
I have to jump in with a question here because there's a term that's been thrown out here so casually and it makes me smile. Specifically, what is spiritual psychology? They never had that when I was going through school. I was a comparative religion major. So to get a degree in spiritual psychology means what?
So a degree in spiritual psychology, it's basically putting soul back into the study of psychology. So the two professors that I had, Ron and Mary Holnick, basically developed a system where really the point of that degree was to help you get back into alignment with what your soul desires. So yes, we studied all of the, the psychologists that, the typical ones, Freud, you name it, Carl Rogers, but it was a constant practice of let's come back to what the soul needs. What's compassionate self-forgiveness? And that ultimately, a technique that we learned, compassionate self-forgiveness is forgiving yourself for buying into the misperception that you've done something wrong or someone else has done something wrong. And so instead of judging all of the behaviors, this process that we would go through ultimately would end in, oh my goodness, nothing actually happened that can harm me or hurt me. It's all my thought system. And anything that's surfacing is for the healing of the mind. So it's really, I mean, it was a university course that was in direct alignment with A Course in Miracles. So for me, it was really easy, but it's spiritual psychology is basically asking us to not look at the behaviors and look beyond to that soul in front of you. It's asking us to not give advice, but to not even assume for 1 second that we know someone's spiritual path, that we would know their karma. Excuse me. Like we can't possibly know what someone's spiritual history is of any way, shape, or kind. So all we need to do is just be this loving battery of light. And it switches you into being a neutral observer of life rather than someone that is constantly engaged in all these little details that upset us or flat out get us an argument, rage. Trust me, my friends know, they call me the rager because I've had my fair share of expressing emotions. But spiritual psychology is also, what needs to be expressed. Every emotion is okay. Every emotion. And as a little girl, anger was never allowed in my household. Anger, if I had any, was met with anger. And my parents were incredible, loving souls. But the very, very few times that I can count on my household that my dad was upset, I rest assured I never wanted to see it again. So spiritual psychology allowed even anger to not only be accepted, but to be something I use to guide me. All it means is I'm out of alignment. How? Where? Let me ask spirit. Get me back in alignment. So does that answer your question to some degree?
It answers it really beautifully. I love that. I will insert here that my mother at age 89, she broke her foot actually, and she was up all night, and she suffered from insomnia anyway, although she never suffered. She always used it to do things.
Her advantage.
She came in to breakfast in the morning and she said, I've decided I wanted to master something before I die. And I said, master what? 89 knitting? Like, what are you talking about? Which would be a big joke for my mother if she started knitting. And she said, no, quantum physics. And I started to laugh, and she got every single audio book there was on quantum physics for the next year. Wow. Voraciously. Like took it in, studied it, met with someone every Sunday to discuss it. And I said to her, why? And she said, because they finally bridged the language from when I was researching parapsychology to spirit. And so science and spirit has come together in a certain way through quantum physics. And I want to hear the new language. And you have just given me that about like a comparative religion major who was also into psychology. There's a bridge here in languaging and framing that I think is very beautiful. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, and the language that Ron and Mary gave us, that's what, like, these, the students came from all different walks of life. There were CEOs, for giant TV networks. There were people who were there who are heroin addicts. There were mothers, there were doctors, there, you name it, but they gave us a common language. So to this day, I consider those my fellow students, my graduates, that, they are my first family, because it's so easy to support each other with a common language. But the language is this, it's really the same as the course, just put in experiential terms in a class, in a classroom. So we could experience miracles together, so it's a beautiful program.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Joanne, this would be a great time if you could share your forgiveness story.
Yes.
Okay, I'll share that story. Well, it's funny because my forgiveness story actually began at the University of Santa Monica. And I was a new student I was maybe 2 or 3 months into the program. And our program, we only met on weekends. We would start on a Friday and we would go all the way to Sunday evening, once a month. But, people flew in from all over the world. So in one of the classes, we did what was called a healing of memories. And Mary took us back through our memories, a beautiful guided meditation. And she was taking us back to childhood. But I all of a sudden felt my heart racing, and I went kind of just flying past childhood, and all I could see in front of me, and even saying this right now, I can feel my heart rate kicking up a little bit. All of a sudden I saw in neon letters, WW2, as in World War II. And it was bright pink, just blazing in my mind. And it scared the hell out of me. I was like, what is that? My heart was pounding. I couldn't even really stay in the room. I felt like I was going to vomit. I didn't know what this was about. So everyone else is, in the memories of their teddy bears and childhood bedrooms. And I'm faced with this totally different experience. I did eventually go out of the room. I didn't handle it well. I came back, I calmed down. And then they said for 30 days, whatever your little one saw, work with your little one, comfort them, let them know that what they saw or they experienced, it's okay. And it's just, a gentle practice. It's a 30-day practice, actually a 33-day practice. Well, when I went home, I couldn't do the practice. Every time I tried to go back to whatever WW2 meant, I would panic, absolute full-blown panic attack. And so when I returned to school that following weekend, I was in a trio, which means that there's a client, a facilitator, and a neutral observer. We were just doing our, practicing coaching. And in this one particular trio, the guy who was the facilitator started attacking the gal who was a client. He just kept insisting she needed to say more and express more. And it made me panic. So at the break, I went to my teachers, and actually I think it was after the break, I shared that was really upsetting for me. I didn't know what to do with that. And suddenly my teacher just looked at me and she said, have you had any past life experiences? And my body went into full-blown tremors. I had never experienced anything like that. And I said, no, I have hints of things, but I've never had an experience. But I couldn't stop shaking. And right then it was time to go on a break. And my teacher said, listen, I'd like everyone to leave Joanne alone. She needs just energetically, she needs some space. And I remember this one gal, of course, didn't listen to what the teacher said and immediately came up and said, I've had past life experiences. I can help you. And it took me out of the tremors, which was nice. But I was still really jarred. And when I went on to the break, the tremors started up again. I started shaking. My friends saw me. And suddenly I was surrounded by counselors. And they're like, Joanne, just come with us into the side room. And I said, no, I'm fine. They're like, just come with us. So we lovingly call this the back room story now, but not bathroom, but back room. It was a classroom in the back of the building. And they took me in the back and just laid me down and said, listen, just rest for a minute. You probably are on the precipice of some kind of a revelation. The shaking, the tremors, it's normal. Your body's just releasing something. And to make a very long story short, these incredible counselors, I mean, we're talking, as far as I'm concerned, some of the best of the world. I think one was guiding me and there was 4 others holding space. And then my professor, Ron, came in at one point and he just smiled. He's like, don't worry, you're probably going to have a release and, see the lights of heaven after this. Like it'll be beautiful. Don't worry. And I was like, what will be beautiful? Okay, I'm in. But this one counselor started working with me and she just asked if I had any memories of the past. And I did go through a couple of past lives, but then all of a sudden I could see someone with this very defined uniform on in my mind and very specific pants that had kind of like puffy sides. And I was like, what am I seeing? And I was describing it to her. And suddenly I had this realization that this person I was seeing was me. And I was getting ready to shoot a woman who was on the ground, kneeling, huddled up, with her back to me. I knew there was a child with her too. And I suddenly had the realization that I not only had murdered this woman in a past life, but I had then I experienced in that moment the physical sensations of being shot in the chest. And it was excruciating. And at that moment, I almost ripped my shirt off completely. I think I started screaming in tongues. I was crying. I was sobbing. I couldn't believe what, quote unquote, I had done. But I realized this was a World War II scenario, and I was on the quote unquote wrong side of the fence. And I had shot a mother. And then in that same moment, I realized, and this is hard for me to tell the story because as I mentioned to Matt, not even my kids know this story. A few of my friends and classmates do because they were there. So this is the first time I'm kind of publicly outing myself. So forgive me if I'm a little shaky on this.
Totally forgiven. It never happened.
It never happened.
Right.
And I did get to that point, thank God. But anyways, at the moment that I realized that I had shot this mother, I suddenly saw the faces of my friends who were mothers in the quote unquote, this lifetime. And I realized that everyone that I thought I had shot had come back, and they were now my friends that I loved dearly. But I saw them. It was like watching a movie reel go by, and I just sobbed and sobbed. And then I had this realization of, oh my God, is this why, out of guilt, that I started the Moms Club of Mid-Wilshire in LA? Is this why I was a school teacher teaching about World War II and the Holocaust? I mean, I'd taken hundreds of students to the Museum of Tolerance. And it's like suddenly my life and the things that I had done, I could put in the context of this experience. And it was both terrifying and revealing. And, I had the counselor there still with me as I'm screaming and crying. And as she walked me through it, she kept asking, what are you seeing? What are you seeing? And at one point, I was literally like on a battlefield, lifted above the battlefield. And it was like spirit was right next to me, showing me from above what was happening. But maybe it was a second of time, maybe it was 10 seconds. I don't really know. But what I experienced looking down was all of these people who were battling. It was like I could see their soul contracts, and they were all there to heal the mind, to work something out. And I don't know how else to explain it, but it was like two soldiers might have been battling, but they were actually learning about brotherhood. There was another one that was like karmic, where someone who had once been, the predator was now the victim. And there was so many, like hundreds of different soul contracts working out, that when I was lifted above it all, I just remembered feeling this unbelievable peace of, I think the words that I heard were, war is a place of expedited soul growth. In other words, souls who have huge things that they're trying to work out as quickly as possible, they come into war, they work them out, and they leave. Then it's over. But after that, I had a different sense of, I just had a different view even on war. And it's not like I walk around going, oh, war is fine, everyone's working out their soul contracts. What I say is there is something far bigger that is happening than just what we see on the news or anything else. And so I first saw that, and then I was lifted one more level above it, where suddenly I just heard, and none of it's real. It's an illusion. And it was like, what? And I didn't get to stay in that peace very long, unfortunately, but I did feel this moment of, oh my God, it's all somehow made up. And then I think at that point, I kind of came back into the room with the count. I became aware of the space. And I think I looked at the counselor and I said something like, oh my God, it's not real. And she just smiled like, you're right. It's not real. I was exhausted at that point. And then, to be honest, I wish my professor had been right, that I would have just experienced the lights and that had been it, and this massive moment of grace. But what happened was the next couple of years, it was like I had to undo that lifetime of being violent, of the anger, the rage, the voicelessness of being a soldier. And, it seemed like everyone was hitting me with like, hey, do you want to see a movie? And I'd say, yeah. And they're like, oh, it's about World War II. I'm like, great. Yeah, actually, I don't want to see it. So I used my friends, my teachers, I used everything that spiritual psychology offered to clear the massive guilt. But even then, when I would go back to the Museum of Tolerance, like one time I was back there and Anne Frank's diary was there, I just cried because I had taken students to the Museum of Tolerance and I taught them to be, look at what the Nazis did, and which is true in the physical world. But then when I would go back and read Anne's words, like she got it. And but that's not what I was teaching my student. I didn't have any idea that you could have compassion for both sides of war to the depth that I now had because of this strange experience. But it did take me a long time. It was no joke, because if you can imagine being a soldier on either side, the feelings that you have to process, the emotions that you've stuffed, the guilt, the shame, and ultimately, like the Course says, it all goes back to one problem, the problem of separation. So in whatever reality my soul chose to either create a fake story of war, if you want to call it, or I experienced it on some level, I ultimately was playing out the one problem of separation. And so it's probably been more recently in the last year or two that finally makes sense to me. And I don't judge war. I don't look at it in the same way that I used to, but I can help people see things differently. Or I can work with someone who's a Marine who has done some horrific things, and I can genuinely say, I love you. I don't care what you think you've done. I'm absolutely here to listen, to guide you. And they might insist, yeah, but I've done this, this, and this. And I'm like, I know, but we're going to get through that together. Like, I have a different level of compassion because of what I went through. I know that was a long-winded story, but that's the essence of it. And yeah, so like I told Matt, I'm outing myself. My kids hopefully won't listen to this podcast for a while. So.
That's very, very brave of you, and
Yes.
and good for that. Have you read at all the Bhagavad Gita?
No, I have not.
It's that story. It's about a prince who learns that he will go into battle facing his family, and he seeks out Krishna for help and learns about seeking God and fulfilling, his dharma, and so he has to go into the battlefield and literally come up against his family in war.
Wow.
And what that means. You really should check it out. I think you'll be blown away by the
similarities.
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's, and it's led me to other experiences as well. One, I'll just share briefly. When I was in England, I lived there for the last 4 years. And there was one evening where my husband said, why don't you, well, actually, I heard the voice in my head. I heard the Holy Spirit say, go have tea. And it was 10 o'clock at night. It was a Japanese restaurant that he worked for. So I was pretty much in my pajamas saying, Spirit, why do you want me to go have tea right now at 10 o'clock? But I went, and I was sitting in the front bar area having my cup of tea. And then all of a sudden, my husband, who was the general manager at the time, he saw some people pass by on the street, and he went outside and dragged them in at 10 o'clock at night. And I'm thinking, oh my God, stop. It's 10 o'clock at night. Why are you pulling people in to, feed them sushi this late at night. But what he does is he looks at me and he goes, oh, this is my wife. You can sit with her. And I'm looking at him like, are you insane? What are you doing? Like, I'm tired. I'm in my pajamas. And what had happened earlier in that day, I had a friend whose family was deeply involved in what was going on in Afghanistan. Her parents were part of they were helping the UN. Her dad actually helped when the Taliban first fell. Her dad helped bring the new currency into Afghanistan. So deeply, deeply involved. But this is during, the latest attack on Kabul and all of that, when the Taliban were taking over, I guess that was a summer or so ago. And my friend, I reached out to her and I said, is there any way I can help you? And she said, just amplify my voice. People don't understand what's going on. And so I tuned into spirit. I wrote this editorial piece. It wasn't quite what she was looking for, but as I was writing, because of my experience, I deeply held both the people who were suffering in Afghanistan, and I held the Taliban soldiers in my strength and love. I saw, all of them collectively, like their hearts lighting up, God pouring in, everyone in their strength, fear falling away. And I held that in prayer for quite a while. And that night, when my husband brought these two random people in, we were talking about for 45 minutes. And I kept thinking, Spirit, why am I here with these people? And suddenly the wife goes, oh, sorry, my husband's been on his phone so much. He's got kind of a big emergency. And I looked at this guy and I said, well, what's the emergency? And he said, oh, I'm in charge of security in Kabul for all of the news stations, diplomats, and I'm trying to get people out right now. And I just looked at him and I said, my friend, her family is there. She's trying to get people out right now. She can't get visas. She's trapped. And he just looked at me and he said, give me their names. He goes, I have hired the last 4 planes coming from Jordan to Kabul. I've got the lists. I can get them out. And I said, well, they can't even get visas. And he goes, all they need to do is get on the plane. We'll get them to a different country. We'll get them their visas once they get to Germany or the UK. I can't guarantee where they're going to end up, but we'll try to get them out. I was blown away, but I know this man was drawn to me and I was drawn to him because I held both sides in the light. And he did reach out to my friend. He did begin the process with her. Unfortunately, the Taliban attacked the airport the next day and everything was shut down. But I heard so clearly from that point, what I was supposed to do was complete. Whatever love I sent, I did it. The Holy Spirit had it from there. I saw people in their strength, not their weakness. And again, I don't think I could have done that had I not had that real or unreal experience in the back room of my university. There's no way. And I'm still friends with this gentleman. But we couldn't believe that we had come together. And he wasn't even supposed to be in Bath that night, Bath, if you say it correctly. He wasn't supposed to be there. They were supposed to be honeymooning up in Scotland, and I wasn't supposed to be there. I was supposed to be at a friend's house. So, Spirit will do what's needed. But to me, it was just, and people say, oh, I don't, prayer is not enough when it comes to war. I kind of think, really? Well, I don't know how you're praying, but I know my prayers have an impact even across the world. I don't have to be there, but if I'm called to pray and I'm called to see people in their loving, I will equally love both sides, period, end of statement. And that is my only job, is to be that light for those people.
Really wonderful message. I mean, one of the parts that tickles me was just how you started it, which is no matter how deep, and I do listen to Spirit completely and deeply and do whatever Spirit really tells me to when I hear Spirit and wants. Still, that question comes up. Why do you want me to go to
why tea at 10 o'clock at
why
night?
do you go to tea at 10:30 at night,
In my pajamas, of all things.
Exactly. Like we still ask. And it, again, toward the end of my mom's life, she would say, as she heard that voice, she started to say, "Why is a crooked letter? Don't go there." It would make me laugh. But she also deeply, one of her greatest meditations daily was, what is this for? What is this for? But it's a different question. than the details of this is to get you to this place to do. It's truly, the answer is always love. If it's not love, we're not doing it. So I really do love that you listened and you asked, but even though there was no answer till later, you went.
I love that's the best part of the story, that you went to tea at 10 o'clock at night.
Yes. well, it kind of is. It kind of is.
It is.
That's when everything unfolds. And even metaphorically, people read tea leaves. So you went for your future and you went for your friend's future, and there is no time. So it all kind of collapsed into what really mattered, was this experience of connection, love that Spirit brought you to and allowed you to be the light that you're very, very dedicated and purposed to being. So,
well, and it's interesting too, because what's coming into my mind right now is, was that prayer opportunity for me for them, or was it actually a level of forgiveness for myself, for my own supposed participation in war? Again, maybe that's just some giant story, but it was effective enough for me to understand that I will have repeated lifetimes to heal. And however long I want to take, that's, by seeing the light in others, that I'm really giving it to myself.
And I have the answer for that.
Oh, yes, please tell me.
The answer is yes. Was it for you? Was it for them? Was it for this? Was it for that? Yes.
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 Check.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Good for you for listening.
And Joanne, you mentioned that you had that realization that it all really didn't happen and it's not real. But when did it start to feel that way? Was it kind of like a logical understanding first, or has it slowly kind of come in like a tide where experientially it doesn't feel real now either?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I saw it, it's like if you want to hike Everest, you can actually see photos of the top of the mountain, but you haven't experienced the top of the mountain. Right. I would say, in all honesty, that happened to me back in 2013, and it's probably taken almost a decade to really, it probably around the time that I was saying those prayers for the Taliban and the people of Afghanistan, that it started to really come full circle for me. But yeah, that's a good question. I think it's been slow over time. And like I said, when I had that experience, even though I did quote unquote see the top of the mountain, I still had to, on some level, process the emotions and everything around war that I hadn't back then. Even the guilt for quote unquote teaching my students incorrectly. Well, I didn't know, but let me tell you, if I took people on a field trip to the Museum of Tolerance now, I've got a whole different story to share. And the love that I have for everyone, it just feels so different. But as a teacher, teaching my 8th grade students, I don't need to have guilt for teaching them wrong, but now I could just, it was, again, it was just another visit. Oh, wow, I was off. And so of course now, like I recently visited Amsterdam and I wanted to go back. I just felt, you go to Anne Frank's house, many tourists do. And I also felt a different presence. I felt Spirit with me there. Whatever happens, it's like, oh, I'm just here to be the presence of love. And also to some level, not buy into the story of victim. Like, I'm going to see through that. We are eternal, period. And if I'm drawn to places now, so I don't buy into that story, or I'm given myself an opportunity to rise above fear, then that's my practice. That's how Spirit's guiding me to strengthen this muscle of forgiveness for myself and the separation, or wherever this all came from. It's everything just becomes an opportunity, a baby step towards the next level of my own consciousness.
Oh. And when you get caught now in an ego storm and it feels very real, and you feel like, hey, this is the story of Joanne and I'm a victim or a victimizer, guilt's coming up and how dare they, how do you get back on track? Is there anything practical you do to kind of get recentered?
Yeah, it's funny you asked. So I've been teaching A Course in Miracles classes for the last, year and a half. And I have this really simple diagram that I use. All of my students know it. We've used it 1,000 different ways, but I basically draw, if I'm really stuck, I draw a circle, and everything that's upsetting, I write in that circle, and I call that the ego circle. So this is all the story of the ego. It's like having its own little stage. And then I draw another circle that I call the eternal circle, and I'll write whatever words that day inspire me, whether it's the divine or I see a picture of a cherry blossom or an eagle, whatever word inspires me. And I basically draw a line from that eternal circle. I draw a line that goes from the eternal to the ego to remind me the one problem is this mad idea that I'm separate. So I remind myself, okay, I created this problem. And then I draw a line going from the ego circle back to the eternal. And I label that the holy instant, because that is my road back. So the second I realize I'm in chaos, when I see it on a quote unquote stage, on a little circle, it's like I'm capturing those thoughts on paper. And I'm saying, Spirit, here, I'm handing this to you. I don't need to analyze the chaos anymore, because I don't think the ego really, the ego is going to make things as chaotic as possible, so we never can truly understand them. So I just take that circle and I hand it back over to the eternal. And from the point that I hand over the issues, consciously hand them over when I'm, that upset, then I just wait for Spirit steps. How do I now get out of the chaos? I don't have to analyze it. Now, sometimes I might be called to analyze it, or maybe a therapist stumbles across my path, but I just wait for the steps. What now? I'm in chaos. Move me out, move me out. And I will, every time I'm given the little steps. And it might be that I need to express rage. Maybe I'm really upset about something and I was holding rage that I didn't realize was, that intense. So then I'll turn to one of my practices of freeform writing, and I'll write and write and write and write. I'll ask Spirit to keep showing me what's in there. What do I need to express? So I have like a container for what I need to express, but I write and write and write and write and write until, I get clarity. Like, what's the other view that I missed? And, so I'll do something like that. Or, I have a lot of mighty companions now. I can turn to one of them and say, listen, there's a death grip here. I got the ego death grip. Help me out. And sometimes I think just sharing with mighty companions, there's no judgment. So anything you say first from the ego point of view, they just listen. And it's like listening to a child have a tantrum. You can't rationalize with a child that's screaming on the floor. So let the ego have its way, have its tantrum, express everything that it needs to, just fully accept it. And when it calms down, then go into the practice of whatever the course calls me to. And a lot of times I just, at that point, I'll open the course and say, show me what I'm missing. Show me how to move through this, whether it's a chapter on special relationships or, whatever it is. But, I think I have a lot of different practices, but the biggest is really kind of capturing those ego thoughts, seeing them as separate from the eternal, and then calling in that holy instant. So I'm a very visual person. So it's as simple to me as like putting your problems on a plate, on a platter, and then saying, here, God, here's my problems. Now move me to my next step out. So I don't know if that makes sense, but when
Yes.
I draw it out on paper, it's very clear.
No, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
I like that. The ego circle, the eternal circle. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And, you can put judgments in there. You can put fear in there. On this last retreat that I was just leading in Washington, a lot of people were experiencing abandonment and isolation issues. Great. Let's put them in the ego circle. Like, how is that playing out with other egos, for example? But it still goes back to the one problem, which is the problem of separation. And so you can first get it logically, but then once you ask for the steps to get out of it and Spirit comes through, that's when that proof, it's like, wow, the holy instant really, works, and I can have faith and trust, and I just need to do those next steps. And so it's just a process that, something I've just developed over time, but it's how the Holy Spirit knew my mind worked visually. And, I have to draw everything out. So maybe it's because I was a school teacher. I used to teach elementary school. I'm like, I'm still at that level. I need a circle and lines to understand this. So complicated text.
No, I like that. That's helpful.
Yeah. I do too. I love all the different ways that and different tools we use to allow our minds to release.
Yeah.
And I think allow is a very, very strong word. It's not surrender. It's not release. But it's a tool to say, as you were saying before, allow a safe place for anger, allow a safe place, that's not hurting anyone else, for all those emotions to be looked at and neutralized.
Yeah.
On the way to remembering who we really are.
Yeah, that's very true.
And it also gives us permission to use our sense of control. And I do mean sense of control, because we really know that we don't have any ultimately. But instead of saying, we have none, actually we have some. We can allow consciousness in.
Yeah. And let's be clear, when I said earlier in this call that I've been known to rage, I have had plenty of experiences of raging. And yes, there was an expression that needed to come up on some level, but ultimately I never felt good. It's like in the long term, it didn't solve the biggest problem of all. So I was like right back to having to, work my process again.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is important to remember, like, when the rage is there, bring it to a safe space. Yeah. Don't puke it onto anyone else.
Yeah. I've done that.
Exactly. Yeah. Because it doesn't get rid of it either. It just moves it temporarily.
It's like a tag you're it, and then someone else dumps it on someone else. Right. Yeah. So.
That's funny.
Well, Joanne, we like to ask a question just for fun, and that is, what is your favorite comfort food? Calories aside, just what is your favorite comfort food?
That's funny. The weirdest thing is coming to mind, because I wouldn't say this is my comfort food, but when you asked that, I just heard kale of all things.
No, that can't be a comfort food. That's the one thing that's not acceptable. We have to go to another one. How about when you were a kid? What was your favorite comfort food?
You've crossed Matt's line.
That's my line. That's my red line.
You need to have a forgiveness.
I do.
A kale forgiveness opportunity.
Yeah, he really does.
I have to put that in my ego circle right now.
But that should be really easy for you to think it doesn't exist, Matt. So, that should be an easy
funny.
step.
I don't, maybe I said that just for you, Matt, because I was like,
is
that what I heard?
You're bringing my resistance to the surface at this
moment.
Welcome.
You're welcome. Well, the only other comfort food popping to mind is I have a very special memory of my dad taking me each Sunday to, I think it was called Thrifty's. We would go get a little scoop of pineapple ice cream. And that's, it was this little funny scoop, this little strange scooper that they had. And I would get my scoop of pineapple ice cream. So
was it like a square scoop?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. That's what it was.
There's a place in Idaho that is famous for their square ice cream.
That's so funny. And I haven't had pineapple ice cream in years, but if it can't be kale, that's a sweet memory that I have coming up.
It's funny, Joanne, before you said kale, I was like, please don't say kale.
Oh, see,
I
did. I swear to God, I was saying it. Please don't say kale. It was a setup.
Matt, are you willing to do the work or not?
I'm willing. I'm visualizing the circle with kale in it right now, the ego circle.
Okay. And you know what? I think we should support him in this, Joanne.
I think we absolutely, and if you're going to put the circle down, you need to physically draw that line, Matt, from the ego circle, with the kale, draw that line, write the word holy instant and hand it over to the Holy Spirit. And he'll work on your, there you go. He'll work on that. He'll work on that for you.
I'm excited about this. Thank you.
No
I just
wonder
have to
said
laugh.
kale.
I just have to laugh that this is a lesson for me and Kale.
Okay. For me, it's iceberg lettuce.
Okay.
Have hated it since I was a child. I even wrote a short story in high school about how it was taking over the world because it's called a head of lettuce and it's in everything. And it's like, things that you would never expect. It's under just as a little dish. And I always felt it had a taste, but everyone told me, no, it has no taste. And I despised it.
But you have to cut it in a wedge. It has to be in a wedge with blue cheese dressing and bacon.
No. And the worst thing is it on a hot sandwich where I could smell it in the car, where I get nauseous. So I've even tried to eat it when I had a cold and couldn't taste it, and my body couldn't handle it. So that's been my thing all my life. My brother used to cut carrots in the middle and stuff it in there to see if I could taste it and find it, and I always did.
Well, you'll have to put that in the ego circle, the kale and iceberg lettuce.
It's all coming up, and Matt's kind of connected, kale, lettuce, So we have our work. We really do. I'm joining you in the circle.
Okay.
Oh, excellent.
We'll put iceberg lettuce in there and kale.
Yeah.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
too funny.
Joanne, thanks so much for coming on Miracle Voices and sharing your miracle voice. Before we let you go here, is there any website or social media or way you want people to contact you or connect with you?
I haven't updated my website in a while. That website, it's joannemenon.com. But people can also, it's just as easy to email me directly. And my email is Jo at joannemenon.com. I'm not the most tech savvy person when it comes to updating websites. And then my retreat is joannemenon.com/retreat if people are interested in escaping with a few mighty companions, because that's always amazing to have that.
And it sounds like you go to fun places too, like Washington in the summertime is a great place.
Yeah, we just went to Olympic National Park. So we do the deep dives in the Course in Miracles. Deep. We use the circle a lot. But then we get a breather. We go hiking to a waterfall. We go out to the beach. I bring in the Macaw elders to talk about spirituality that's been in existence for 10,000 years before, Jesus was even around. It's like 10,000 years predates, the Romans, the Greeks. And so I try to balance it. So you go deep, but then you have breathing space. And so I'll hold that retreat again next summer, and I will probably do one in the UK in Bath in May, but maybe one in Newport in January. But to me, gathering, podcasts are wonderful, Zoom calls are wonderful, but it's magic when you can actually be, I like to say sometimes trapped with other mighty companions. There's no place to go. Then your biggest wounds will come up, and you'll have such incredible support to heal those in communion. It's like, wow, it's hard to compare, what that's like. And then to spend quality time with those people right after you're friends for life. You don't forget those moments and those friendships.
Yeah.
Right. See, if we were in person, we could have exorcised my kale demon right on the spot, but now we had to do it virtually, and I'm not quite sure it's gone.
We can have a private session, Matt. We'll work on that. All your food groups that bother you, we'll take care of those.
Maybe I'll just wait and see if Matt gets over kale, and then I'll step in with iceberg
lettuce. That's hilarious. It's great. I love it.
Well, Joanne, have a great rest of the summer. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your story. We really appreciate it.
Very much.
Absolutely. I was happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation. It was really quite special.
Thanks so much for listening today. Please subscribe to Miracle Voices by hitting the subscribe button on your podcast app. If you are enjoying these conversations, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you use. And lastly, please visit us at miraclevoices.org and join our newsletter so we can stay connected. Until the next podcast, I want to leave you with my favorite course quote: "When you want only love, you will see nothing else."